If the thought of staying in your current job until you're 67 scares you to death, this video is for you. That was me a few years ago until I learned this simple solution to learning how much I actually need in order to sustain my lifestyle so that I didn't have to be employed until I'm almost dead and I can start enjoying my life sooner. So we're going to dive in to explain what it is, what this tool is, how it works, why you can trust it, and then how do you apply it to your situation. So this all revolves around something called the 4% rule, which was kind of discovered by a guy named Bill Bengen, who is a financial advisor. And it was backed up and continued later on with something called the Trinity study, where essentially they were researching what is the percent amount, how much could someone pull off of their retirement portfolio for 30 years and not run out of money by the end. And they found a few interesting things. If you look at this chart here, let me get my red pen. Throughout the history, the data that they had at the time, they looked at stock market data and inflation data and simulated what if someone in, let's just use 1950 because that's a nice round and easy number. If someone retired in 1950, if we look back at the data between 1950 and 1980, what would have happened if they withdrew 10%? Well, they would have ran out. But what if they withdrew 4%? They would have had a lot. And they've computed each scenario, each withdrawal rate, and found that, okay, the one that worked where they never hit zero, but they didn't end with excess tons of cash, was about 7.2% that year. And then they did it for another year. Let's look at, what's this one over here? 1935. Well, it turns out if you would have used 7.2 in 1935, you would have ran out of money. They could only withdraw 5.8, let's call it. And they did that for a bunch of years to make this chart. And they found that the lowest was right here, Safe Max. The lowest ever was just a hair over 4%. So what does that mean? The 4% rule is already ultra conservative. It's based off the worst case scenario in past history. Now, since then, people have continued to study this as we get more and more years of new data, and they basically extend the study to include exactly that, more data. And what happens is people like the poor Swiss can now make charts all the way up to 2024, 2025, probably pretty soon, with does the 4% rule still work? In the years after the original study to now, has anything changed? Does it need to be reduced or not? And basically what gets created is a chart where you plot the percent chance success of not success, meaning having at least $1 left by the time you die, with what you withdraw, what percentage you withdraw. And people also started asking the same question I had: what if you want to be retired for longer than 30 years? So right here we're looking at a chart for 50 years, and the success rate for 4% is slightly lower than if you look at a 30-year chart, but it's still just a hair under 90%. Some people will say, okay, so in order to have an acceptable level of risk, you need to go down to 3.5%, because then you're still basically 100% guaranteed that you won't run out of money. It's like, okay, great, but how many extra years did you have to work in order to boost your percent? Just that, like, nothing's ever 100% guaranteed. And one of the important assumptions to understand about the Trinity study and the 4% rule is that it assumes that you do not adjust or account for anything or make another dollar ever in that 30-year period. So if your grandma sends you 20 bucks on your birthday, you just improved your chances of success. If you choose to go camping one year versus fly overseas, even though you budgeted for it originally, and say the market has a downturn and you say, we need to save a little bit of money this year, let's just go camping, you've just improved your chances of success. Or if you're quitting your regular employment early and you have all this free time, say you choose to do arts and crafts and sell them on Etsy, and you make an extra $3,000 a year doing that just for fun, basically. Well, you're already ahead again of the 4% rule. you've improved your chances of success. Now, why 4%? What happened that year where they could only withdraw 4% and barely not run out of money? Well, it turns out in 1966, that year from above, if someone retired in that year, they basically went their entire 30-year retirement without making any investment gain in the stock market. They had, what is this, 66 to 80, so 14, yeah, basically the first half. The first half of their retirement, the market was just going down. They had a little glimpse of, they had a really sharp drop off early, and they had a little glimpse of hope, but then another drop off. And they basically never recovered, and they still had enough money. Now, what is enough money? What does that mean? They had at least $1 in their account by the time the 30 years was over, which would not be comfortable, but they never had to end up on the streets because of it. The fun thing is, most of the time, you're not anywhere close to that situation. While we're trying to protect ourselves from the worst case scenario when living off of our money in retirement, there's also the other side of the coin of how good things could go. What if we are too conservative and we work too long and save too much money? And so this chart kind of answers some of those questions, where only in 10% of the possible theoretical, simulated situations, only in 10% did people end with less money than what they started with. On average, it's right here, on average, people end up with 3 times as much as they started with. Now, why is that? Well, up here on this other chart, yeah, the safe 4% withdrawal rate is based on the worst case scenario, but the average of these, I covered it up. I'm not very good at that. The average safe withdrawal rate for all these years here shown was 5.75, let's say, 5 3/4. Let me draw that right here. So most of the time you can actually withdraw more. And what's really interesting is this point he makes in his article. Let's see. You only have a 10% chance of finishing with less, but you have an equally likely, I covered it up again, equally likely 10% chance of finishing with more than 6x the starting amount. Okay, so when we go back to this chart, and you say, if I want to retire for longer than 30 years, say 50 years, and I want to withdraw 4%, that's only an 88% chance of success. It's like, well, you have to balance two things. Yeah, you have a 12% chance of running out of money before 50 years is up, but you also have something close to a 12% chance that you end up with way more than you thought you would ever have. So how much flexibility can you put into the situation where maybe I would be willing to work less, try this retirement thing or financial independence? If you're like me, I don't actually plan on retiring, like sitting on the beach somewhere, sipping drinks, where I'm willing to lower that success rate a little bit, knowing that I can adjust and do things as needed based on what happens. So if I go into the first 5 years and we have excellent market returns, then I know, okay, chances are I'm fine. But if you go into the first 5 years and things are looking down, trending downward, then you can say, okay, well, I'm only 40 years old. I could do some work again to earn money to boost that principal back up to sustain myself. Or I could find the work that I actually want to do kind of regardless, like something I enjoy that will make money, but then I don't feel the dread that maybe you currently have at your job, feeling stuck, like you're not trapped in something that you don't enjoy doing because you're afraid of not having enough later. Yeah, that was me. That's not a fun place to be. So basically what this boils down to then is how do you use this information now in your situation? So the 4% rule is how much can you withdraw off of your retirement nest egg? Well, what if you don't have a final retirement nest egg? Well, you probably want to know how much that number has to be, especially if you're just starting out with basic, like you just graduated and you have nothing, and you're like, well, how much do I have to save in order to get however much I need to retire? I don't know any of these numbers. So the one number you can know that's not that hard to find is how much you spend. Oh, let me switch to white. It'll look so much. It'll work better. White. There we go. Oh man, getting used to this whole tablet thing again. Okay, switch to white. So, how much do you spend? Why is that important? Well, if you're trying to go the other way between the two numbers, if you take 1 over 0.04, 4%, that equals 25. Hopefully my handwriting is good enough. So really that's, if you take your spending times 25, you'll get the, let's just call it the nest egg. Boom, 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 boom. Or your FI number, your financial independence number, your freedom number, whatever you want to call it. So for example, if someone spends $60,000, oh my goodness, someone spends $60,000 a year, comma, times 25, that would equal, any guesses? 1.5 million. I feel like I can't write as fast as I can talk. We'll see if that's a problem later or not. 1.5 million. Now it's like, wow, that's either way less than what I thought it was, or that's still a ton of money. How am I ever going to save that much? Well, turns out there are some levers that you can pull in order to adjust. You could try to bring your spending down. On the back side, not really shown here, you could try to bring your income up. This is going to look weird with all these arrows. I didn't plan it super well, probably. Basically, for every dollar you spend, you have to save $25,000. So if you save $1,000, cut your expenses by $1,000 a year, that's $25,000 less that you don't have to save anymore. Some of these other things in the background is, well, you get to choose when you need to acquire the 1.5 million. So if you want to be free in 10 years, 20 years, maybe you just extend the deadline a little bit. That's not the best answer, but it's a possibility. You could play with the 25, and you could say, well, maybe I'm willing to risk it a little bit more and use 4.5%. Maybe I don't need to plan on the worst case scenario because I know I'm still going to be making some money and I'm already ahead of that curve. So what if I used even 5%? Well, let's just check that real quick. 1 divided by 0.05. What is it? I'm guessing it's 20. Let me just double check. Not good at public math. 0.05. Yeah, it's 20. Small wins. That equals 20. So in the same situation, 60,000 times 20, what would that be? Obviously less, but what is it? 1.2 million. This would give us 1.2. So chances are you can hit 1.2 million faster than you can hit 1.5, right? So what we do next is we have to figure out that 60,000 is just an example. You have to know exactly what your annual spending is. And side note, I have a free cash flow tracker spreadsheet that I give away on my website that you can download, where it'll help you import your banking transactions and figure out what that number actually is. But let's say, for example, you look back at your past 3 months of expenses and it was 5,200, 4,800, and I'm just making these up on the fly, and 4,600. Well, that's not really that shouldn't really be an equal there, but the average would be, get my calculator again, because I don't plan these out ahead of time, I just do them kind of on the fly. Sometimes that bites me in the butt, and sometimes it works out nice. 46 equals that divided by 3. That's 4,867 per month. Well, just take that times 12 to get your annual. Times 12 equals 58. You know how I mentioned that sometimes they work out kind of nice? This came out pretty close to 60,000, even though that was just a random pulling those right out of my head. So anyway, you have to know what your current level of spending is, and then what we do is I'm going to actually pop over to a different, camera view and stuff, so I can share my screen. Okay, we're back. This is one of my favorite calculators because it basically shows you when you can be free. And what we're going to do is we're going to take, what do we want to use? Let's use 60,000 a year at 4%, and we'll go to investment length here. Let's put in our target of 1.5 million. That looks right. Let's pretend we're starting with 0. I have 7% in here, and let's say we already know we're contributing $500 to this retirement nest egg. Let's see how long it would take. 42.5 years. Now that's not that much sooner than typical working, a typical career. Get my words jumbled up here. But the fun thing is now you can adjust, you can play with the different numbers, the different levers. So basically that means, well, you probably need to save more per month, or you could maybe try to cut expenses and reduce your target. Where that leads is basically, if you say, okay, I know I don't want to work past 50, and I'm 20. You can also, there's a few different versions of the same calculator depending on what answer you want to find. So let's say your target is at 1.5. You're 20, you only want to work till 50, so that's 30 years. Oops. Rather than knowing that you're contributing $500 already, you can back calculate how much you should be contributing. Starting at 0 for 30 years, 7%. Okay, well instead of 500, it should really be 1,275. And then you can start to, that's what I do with financial coaching clients, is like, how can we get that number? What can we do to basically save and invest more? And then, let's see, where was I? I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, anyway, so you figure out, how close am I to being able to save that amount? What do I need to do in order to hit that? Or you could even say, what if I found a way to save $2,000 a month? This is between your 401k, your Roth IRAs, and your brokerage, it could include your employer match. Everything combined, total net effect. Oh, well then I'd only have to work for 24.5 years. So this comes in really handy when you're trying to balance out, what should I be spending my money on? Can I afford this? It depends on your goals. If your goals is to buy your time back and your independence and your freedom, well, if you're spending $200 a month, if the question is $200 a month towards this thing or this stuff, or maybe this experience, like going out to eat, versus saving it for your future, the difference that $200 a month can make, let's see what that is. So, okay, it was only a year. So, in that example, it's okay, do I want an extra $200 a month in order to enjoy my life now versus, quitting work a year early? Yeah, probably. But let's say someone was spending, say you weren't able to save this much. The lower the numbers, the more effect it has. But if you weren't able to hit this $1,800 or $2,000 range, and that same $200 difference, so let's go back down to 500, where we were at 42.6. Well, if you can save an extra $200 by not doing whatever it ends up being for you, well, that shaved off, what is that? That's basically 38, a little over 4 years. So it makes more of a difference, right? And it tries to put it into perspective of, well, if you say, I really wish I didn't have to work until 67 or even older in some cases. And it's kind of put your money where your mouth is, but put your money where your actual dreams and goals are, and make sure that what you're spending your money on instead is worth it. based on the time, your ultimate the time you'll have to spend earning money. So remember the steps. You have to know what you're spending. Take that spending times 25, assuming you're using 4%, based on the kind of the research and the data that I showed in the beginning, and play with that calculator and figure out, okay, so how does that tie into the time for me? Like my how soon do I want to be independent or financially free? Like if I'm okay with working until 50 versus I want to get out as soon as possible, I'll really tell you what you have to do per month in order to achieve that goal. Really, after you do those two things, as you play with the calculator, you think about what levers you can control and adjust in order to meet your goals sooner or easier. That's increasing your income, gaining new skills to earn higher pay, or decreasing your spending, trying to find those things that aren't as worth it to you as buying your time back. And that's that's the meat of financial coaching, is helping people figure that out and work through that. But just remember that free cash flow tracker is out there for you if you need help doing that very first step of figuring out how much you're actually spending. And beyond that, I'm going to have to cut myself here, otherwise I will keep rambling forever. And we'll see you in the next video.